Okay, next we're going to have not a presentation, actually a conversation about marketing technology. The aforementioned Peter Orban, who heads ICANN, which is the Insight Innovation Corporate Advisory Network, which is a new initiative of Green Book, which is basically an organization centered on the clients and making sure that their needs are heard. And we also have Joseph Kurian of 249 Labs. He's an expert in marketing automation and marketing technology. And they're going to come up and the idea of this was to be sort of a fireside chat. So they're just going to be talking, and then at an appropriate juncture, we're going to start asking them questions. So Peter and Joseph, come on up.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to sit on the stage, or do you want to?
Well, actually, we'll start with the presentation. So let me limp up to this stage. Sorry about that. I had a sporting injury this past weekend. So I was always wondering, how can you squeeze in so much in so little time when Boone speaks? As you can tell, English is not my first language, and I was wondering, is this a gift? Is this something you can learn? But I was always amazed. So with this, good afternoon, everyone. It is quite some challenge to come right after Boone, but I knew what I was getting myself or ourselves into, and our session will slot right in between what he was talking about it and what we heard about storytelling before. And if you think about the marketing process, and it starts, we now know how to craft a story. Now we have seen a very specific way of how to distribute the story, how to take the trucks and send the fish out. But if you wanted to step back and kind of do it in a systemic way, starting where you are today, how to kind of evolve into that next, I think this is what we'll be talking about this. And to kick it off, once upon a time, as we learned, or specifically 5 years ago, Gartner predicted that by 2017, the CMO will spend more on technology than the CTO. And when you look at the data, we are way beyond, not on track, way beyond track. So in other words, technology, the technology that is disrupting our business day in, day out, all of us experiencing what our core business is going through, either benefiting or otherwise, this is also disrupting the marketing process, creating opportunities for a change, if you will. And a little bit of a terminology clarification, since all these phenomena are fairly new. I wanted to make sure that I articulate what I mean by use this term, and it goes back to 10 years ago when I first attended the then inaugural advertising technology conference, where the sole subject was what is technology's role in advertising, and more importantly, how does what Boone called the stack looks like? What are the pieces, how they connect, and more importantly, what's the roadmap from what you have today to something working tomorrow? And then when we look into the digital space in advertising, we see what has happened. But something else began right around the time, which was more focusing on the B2B business, and it invariably was called marketing automation. And we have heard of, or we have seen some of the platforms arising, but ultimately turned into what we'll be talking about today is marketing technology, or Martech, as it is known in this day and age. So a word about a format, as Dana mentioned. Oops. I'll have Joseph take us through his presentation, and we'll come back and we'll have a fireside conversation afterwards. And a word about our presenters. Joseph is an entrepreneur nowadays, but with close to 20 years of digital experience, with a very strong e-business technology skill set and background, and he has driven e-commerce strategy across large corporations like Aetna, where he built a Martech function as a senior director, or prior to that, he worked at Discover Financial Services, also in the digital marketing space, or as a VP at JP Morgan prior to that. So he's today the CEO of 249 Labs, a Martech consulting and app development company, and he helps organizations with their marketing technology needs and consults on how marketing technology areas can be developed and nurtured. So please help me welcome Joseph Kurian.
All right, thank you, Peter. All right, so I'll try to go through these slides as quick as I can here, because I know I'm between you and your break. So who's 249 Labs? So I started 249 Labs about 3 months ago. We're really a company that focuses on this marketing technology space, on this Martech space. So we work with a lot of large companies around what are some of the challenges they have, sort of all the things that I've had to live through. I've extricated myself from the corporate world, and now I'm sort of working on helping other companies fix some of the problems that they have. So we try to understand what kind of challenges they have. A lot of people assume that it's the technology that's the issue. It in fact is not. That's all the way at the bottom in terms of complexities that they deal with. We do work to find out who the vendors are, what they do, what they provide, and so on. We work a lot with this whole IT versus marketing thing that continues to be a big problem in large organizations. And then we do some work around wearables and connected ecosystem, which I can talk about separately. So really quickly, sort of definitions of how I see Martech. So it's really sort of the technology and the services that exist to create experiences for customers when they get engaged with companies, right? So some of these you see up front. You get emails from people. I've put some lists down here. Click to chat, digital advertising, search. These are all things that customers can actually see and engage with. Other pieces of it are really tied to back-end services that feed into experiences that people have. So when you get an email from a company that says, "Dear Joseph," they're not just guessing that your name is Joseph, obviously. They've got a back office system that knows who you are, knows that that's attached to an email address, and sends that out to you. Something that all of you are very familiar with. The point here is, with Martech, there's a front-end piece that customers engage with, and then there's a back-end piece which is equally important, in some ways more important, that you don't actually see. A customer doesn't actually see that. Martech can automate processes that you've got, that IT has typically run before. You can take ownership for that as a business partner and run that stack yourself, right? It's just kind of what we've done in a lot of the big companies that I've worked at, is taking away the ownership of this technology because of how it's been developed and matured, and running that inside the business side of the fence and working with IT more sort of integrators. And then the last point's important. So there's a lot of sort of positive chatter about Martech and so on, but if you use it badly as a business strategy, as a digital strategy, if you use Martech poorly, you will create a bad experience. Buying the technology doesn't automatically mean we're aces, we're golden, we're doing well, right? There's a lot of companies that buy a lot of this tech and use it negatively for customers, and we'll talk a little bit about that further down. So real brief slide about sort of what's going on with the big companies around this. I've been involved with this forever, but I can remember when nobody cared about this. It was all sort of, yeah, that guy runs the email program, that guy runs click to chat, that guy runs click to call. There was no sort of cohesiveness. There was no connective tissue around any of this. So a lot of these companies that you see up here all have independent marketing technology offices within their organization. They're different sizes, they're staffed by different people. Sometimes it's with people on technology, sometimes it's with people on business, but they all exist as formal organizations at very senior levels. In some companies, this is actually at the C-suite, right, which I think is where a bunch of us thought this was going to end up. We'll see how effective that remains, but the point of this slide essentially is there's a lot of big companies that are doing this and using it, and it's something that CEOs are paying attention to, because there's a lot of dollars that are not only being spent on it, but they're looking for revenue return from this technology. So what I was asked to speak about today by Peter and team was really around how Martech can impact you from becoming better marketers. And I think just sitting here and listening to a lot of people, I think you're doing a lot of the right things. So a lot of this is going to be repetitious, but it's worth saying a few times, right? I've spent a lot of time saying a lot of these things multiple times in executive presentations. You just have to keep repeating it so people understand how important it is. So some of the things I'm going to deal with are, how do you leverage some of this technology that's out there? What are the tactical steps that you can take? I clearly heard that some of you are already doing this. What are the associated costs? Everyone assumes a lot of this stuff is really expensive, and that's true. For the big companies like Aetna, as an example, we spent millions of dollars on this stuff, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. What are the benefits to doing this? And then how do you measure success, which is something that us as marketers for years, even in 2015, we don't do a good job with measuring our work. So here's some of the options that you've got for you. Some of these you've already talked about. Content distribution. Peter's told me multiple times about how you've got a lot of content and you're the content experts. I've always been on the other side of the table, sort of listening to the report that comes from research and insights. I haven't actually participated on your side of the fence, but it's clear to me you've got a lot of data, right? You've got a lot of information. There's different ways that you can go about actually getting that content out into the web and getting it out on public space. Content optimization, this is important. When you get stuff out into digital, it's not just enough to take, I think someone mentioned a 100-page PowerPoint, right? I've seen some of these things. It's not enough to take that and just move that online and say you've gone digital, right? You've really got to make sure that you're optimizing the content that you've got, that you're going through these various free tools that exist in the space right now to check your content. Is what you've written matching up to what the search engines are looking for? Because that's how people will find your stuff. And then it's got to be mobile friendly. This is huge. Google has spent a lot of time and money now making sure that how a website appears in mobile is actually going to factor into the search engine results. This is really important to think about. Paid digital advertising, there's a lot of good and bad about this in the media right now. So, Google AdWords, retargeting, social media. You go to Amazon, you look at something, you go and check your email. What you looked at all of a sudden is showing up as an advertising in your email, right? That's what retargeting is around. Social media, I've heard a lot about this stuff, LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn from a business perspective, and the previous presenter talked about that as well. I use Twitter a lot more now than I did 3 years ago. Facebook, I think, has its time and place. I think depending on what you're trying to do with Facebook, that can sort of be a touchy one, but I've obviously put it in here because over 1 billion people use it, so it'd be crazy not to look at it. And then marketing automation. I think someone mentioned I'm a marketing automation expert. I am not. I have used these systems and I have bought these products, but there are people who obviously know and work with these platforms a lot. Essentially what it's trying to do is create an automated process that you can do lead gen, conversion into a hot lead, and then go out there and actually talk to someone, right? So a process that was dominated by a very manual system is now taking the form of a lot of companies. There's big companies that do this and there's smaller companies that do this as well. But it's really about building the customer relationship. I heard someone speak about drip marketing and sort of waiting for 5 years before something comes through. It's absolutely true. I've worked in companies where in the marketing organization, we think we're going to have one conversation with someone and they're suddenly going to be our best buddies, and it's not the case. Someone who is a customer, who isn't a customer now, could be a customer later because through the relationship that we've had with them, they now feel that we're a trusted partner. The automated piece of doing that is what an automation platform is. There's a lot of business strategy around actually getting that to work properly, but that's what the technology does. So around this, so that's all nice, but what does this stuff cost? So I put some real high-level pricing on here for what you would see with some of the lower-end stuff. I think, content distribution, there's a lot of these things for free. You can go out there, you can sign up for WordPress, you can sign up for blogs. This is not an expensive endeavor to take on now. 10 years ago, that was not the case. Getting a website was sort of an event. Getting a domain was an event. It's a complete non-issue now. Now, if you do actually want to spend money on something, there are plenty of companies who will build sites for you and all of that kind of work. But the truth is, with a little bit of work, you can actually do a lot of this content distribution for free. Content optimization, go to Google and just look at the tools that they've got. Right? That company has built products for folks like you to be able to write content, to run it against their tools, and to see whether or not it's optimized for what it is that they'd be looking for. I mentioned Google. I actually use Bing a lot, but the reality of what you're doing around this space is Google is the leader around this space. If it works for them, it's not going to work exactly the same as some of the others, but it's a really, really good place to start. Paid digital advertising, this can vary obviously to $100 a month to a lot, right? You saw what Microsoft is spending on some of these things and GE spending on some of these things. But you can do this pretty cheap. You can actually go up and start up your own paid advertising account on Twitter, on LinkedIn, even on Facebook, if that's where you choose to actually go find your customers. It's not that expensive to do. You can do it for 100. You get to control, basically, in these buying platforms, you get to control how much it is you want to spend. If you want to spend $1,000 a month, that's fine. If you want to spend $100 a month, that's fine. Know that there is going to be a difference in the results based off of that, sort of how some of these platforms work. But you can do it for a pretty cost-effective way. Social media, getting out there and participating, tremendously important. I don't think enough people do this. And it's not just about doing it for your company. I saw there are a couple of entrepreneurs here. I think a lot of you work for companies. It's not enough for you to do social media just for your organization. It's important for you to do it for your own self, for your own brand. Right? We'll talk about this a little bit later on, but it's important for people to actually know and hear in the social media space, which is important, which is searchable, that you are in fact the subject matter expert. You're all experts in your own field, and then the data that you've got. You do need to make sure that you get out there and broadcast that, right? Because no one else is going to do that for you. And marketing automation platforms, this sounds a lot compared to some of these other things up there, but that's really, really cheap. $200 to $400 a month is really not that expensive if you feel like the return is there. So maybe what you want to do is actually try one of these things out for a quarter, for 3 months, and see whether or not it's bringing any value. I've heard some stuff about testing. We'll talk about that in a little bit too, but I think testing this stuff's important. If you're going to market yourself and you're going to use these tools and these technologies, get out there and test it, right? It's really easy for us to listen to what other people are going through, and this worked for that person and this didn't work for that person. If you form your business strategy based off of what other people are doing, this is not going to be a successful way for you to be able to leverage these technologies. It's not hard to do. Get out there and spend a little bit of money and test these things. And if it doesn't work, turn it off. A lot of these companies, I was going to say vendors, a lot of these companies don't require you to sign up a 1-year contract. A lot of them do it month to month. Now, the price you pay is a little bit more, that's true. But if you're just testing something out, why not pay a couple bucks more for a shorter time frame and see whether or not it works for you? Be patient with this stuff, though, right? It's real easy to look at the results after a month and say, this doesn't work, it's rubbish, when in fact you actually needed to give it a little bit more time to bake. What are some of the benefits of leveraging some of this technology that's out there? This goes back to what I said before. It is about building your brand. That could be in sometimes your company's brand. There's a lot of sort of rules around that in many organizations. I think in smaller companies that's easier to do when you're speaking with the voice of your company. But it also builds your personal brand. If you are the people with the content, make sure that other people know that, right? Even for someone like me, I mean, I was fairly visible. I need to keep on going out there and telling people this is what I know, this is what I do, because it's very hard for people just to know what it is that you can do just because you've presented a couple times, right? So building your personal brand is a really, really important part of what you should be doing. Cast a bigger shadow. This I actually got from a mentor of mine many years ago. And it's so true. You should be casting a bigger shadow than the one that you throw, right? And leveraging Martech, leveraging marketing technology enables and allows you to do that in a way that was never really possible before. You can get out into the social media space, talk about what it is that you know without spending tons and tons of money, something that we had to do a lot in the past, or printing stuff and mailing it, which is something that we're trying to get away from in the digital space. Demonstrate your expertise. Talk about things that you've actually done. It shouldn't be all about strategic stuff that you do. It should be about the tactical. What did you do? What did you accomplish? Folks want to actually hear what it is that you've done, not that you've just got great thoughts about this stuff. That's important because there's a strategic part to what you want to sell, but there's a really solid tactical piece that says, I've gone out and I've actually done this, I have done that. You should be doing that. And sell yourself. No one else will. I learned this a long, long time ago. So if you're going to get into this business of getting out there, marketing yourself, you've got to be as aggressive as other organizations and companies are. Companies that are way bigger than you, organizations that are way larger than you. You need to be as aggressive about this. No one else is going to sell what you know, what your brand is, and what you can deliver other than yourself. Measuring success is really important. It absolutely frustrates me even to this day how many big companies I talk to that still do campaigns or any customer engagement activity that don't measure what it is that they do. It's a lot of money. We can pour a lot of money into it. If that money didn't work, we'll just go spend some more money doing something else. This is not a healthy way to live when you're in the digital space. When you're in marketing, there are restrictions on how much you get. That number goes up, that number goes down. Previous speaker talked about budgets. This is something we struggle with all the time. They always come back to you and they say, we need this much from your budget. Make sure that you're measuring what it is that you're doing so that you understand what's effective and what isn't. Tie that into KPIs that you've got as an organization. That could be around growth, it could be around awareness, it could be engagement. I talked about a couple of those things, but it could be around what's important to your company. What's important to you is not necessarily going to be what's important to me, based off of the size of your company, what you're trying to accomplish, and so on. But have 2 or 3 KPIs. Well, start with 1 if that's what it takes. Right? You've got to have something that you can measure yourself against. Social media, when you get out into the social space, there's a lot of analytics tied to these platforms. Go out there and look at that. Are people engaging with the content that you're using? Are you finding the right people to talk to? Right? We'll talk about relevance. Analyze your digital analytics. Your footprint should not just be in the social space. If you've got a website, I heard some people say that they've got a website. Get out there and put analytics on there. If you don't know how to do it, go out there and look for really cheap solutions or people who can help you with that. Measure who's coming to your website, who's coming multiple times. You're not going to necessarily be able to get the specific person, but you're going to get an understanding of how well your content is taking with your target audience, and that's really what you should be doing. Optimize constantly. This is something that I've had to preach for years and years and years, right? Just because you do something once, you don't leave it and go away for 2 years, right? I've had teams that have sat there and they change things every month. They change things every week, depending on what it is. You should be optimizing stuff. You should be testing stuff. You should be saying, this worked and that didn't. The whole Edison thing with the light bulb, right? 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb. You've got to constantly be testing things because there is no one solid answer all the time for anything that anyone's doing in digital. If any company is selling you that, they're lying to you. You've got to keep testing what works. Different things happen with time. Different products come out. Different leadership changes, right? So keep optimizing and see what it is that what is it that works, and importantly, what is it that doesn't work either. And don't get disheartened by this stuff. It is, I don't know how much digital work you all do, but it's a tough place to be at. When you hear about it in the press and you hear about it in the media and you hear what Amazon's doing and all these other great companies, you think, this stuff's going to be really easy. I'm going to get out there and boom, I'm going to be selling all kinds of stuff. It is really hard. And there are days, months, where you can sit and think, my God, this stuff's just a complete waste. Let me just go back to stuff. I've had conversations with this in organizations I've worked at. This digital stuff's not going to work out that well. This whole paperless thing, let's go back to mailing statements. Let's go back to mailing, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to stick with it. You've got to stay with it. If it's not working in one way, it might be because the method that you're choosing to communicate isn't right. It could be that the marketing message isn't right. It could be that for that particular segment, this isn't the particular thing, right? Paperless doesn't fit for some demographics. We all know that. So make sure that it's not just the tech that's getting the blame, but it's a strategy that's working through that. But keep your chin up with this stuff because it can get disheartening when you're talking through some of this. I put together this slide just because this is a really, I don't know how many of you sort of follow the marketing technology space, but there's a huge chart that exists. There's a bunch of companies that have done this, and they've got hundreds and hundreds of vendors on these charts. I put together something like this really as it relates to what it is that I've presented here. So it's around sort of the Martech categories that you see up in the yellow area there. And then there's products that exist within that. What you don't see here is there's another layer. So within blogs, so you've got content distribution within blogs, content marketing within blogs. You've got different companies that have blog technology, right? Lead generation, relationship marketing, there are products within that. There's tens and tens of products within these things. One of the things that we do is work with organizations to get them to figure out this stuff. But the point here is as many choices as there are for individual products, the strategy is around the fact that all these things are either starting to get connected or are already connected, right? So you're going from automation to the social space, into advertising, into search, and all of that sits within the context of measurement. Everything that you're doing in this space, you should be thinking about measuring it. If you're not measuring it, stop doing it, right? In digital, if you're not measuring, stop doing it. That is the single most important thing to do when you're doing anything online whatsoever. So real quick summary around a lot of these different things. So there's a whole ton of marketing technology to help you with, right? There's a ton of different products. There's thousands of vendors in this space. Some of them are really expensive, some of them are free. Look for the lower end stuff if you're just looking to get into this stuff. Prioritize what it is you need based off of your business goals. Someone once asked me, what was the most important thing when they're sort of ranking Martech strategy? How do you go about creating a Martech strategy? I get that question a lot. And it really starts with your business strategy, right? Then you've got marketing strategy underneath that. Your Martech strategy is really all the way at the bottom. Your Martech strategy shouldn't be defining what it is that you're doing as an organization. I guess in some companies it could, if you're a Martech vendor. But it shouldn't be defining that. What you should be thinking about is, what is my business goal, right? What is my customer's goal, be that internal, external? What can we do to solve their problem, and how do we leverage technology at the bottom to actually solve for those problems? So prioritize your needs based on what it is that you're trying to do. Develop something around tactics and a budget. You've got to have some sort of high level, at the very least, high level strategy that says, this is what I'm going to try, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to spend at it. There's nothing worse than just putting a credit card to auto hit on a Twitter advertising campaign and just having it crank against your credit card, right? Understand where it is you're going to stop, evaluate, and then figure out whether it's something you want to continue doing. Work with a partner to get this stuff done. So that could be someone that's internal. It could be resources that you find online. There's a lot of people in this space who are more than happy to help you out. Could be with sort of people like me as well. But try to find help. If you're not comfortable with this stuff, if you need help with this stuff, try to go out there and find people who can help you with this. You'll be surprised by how open people who work in this field are to actually help you out with some of the stuff. It's not easy, and it is confusing. I say it can be confusing. It is confusing. I've been in Martech my whole life, and it is confusing to me still. The main reason for that is vendors keep coming into the market, products keep coming into the market, the sales guys are selling you on all the stuff this is going to magically solve for a company, and it's simply not true. You need to sort of get some sort of help with that until you can build an internal skill set around this stuff. And keep at it. This isn't something that has a start and finish. This is a line that I've used a lot. This isn't something where you begin here and you end there. Once you start this journey, it's a continuous trip that you make. You're constantly optimizing, you're constantly testing, you're constantly seeing what's working for your organization and what isn't. So I went through that pretty quick. Thank you for your time. This is how you get in touch with me if you want to talk about any of this stuff. And I think we've got some questions. Is it?
So I'll start the questions, and we'll start having a conversation. And I want you to chime in, and for a couple of reasons. One is that as we were getting ready for this session, Joseph and I were discussing as to how market research is different from other business-to-business businesses where marketing needs to take place. And I gave him a very short summary, and I would like to see what at least you know what he was responding to. And I said, you know, culturally, we market researchers are trained to be reporters, right? So as I was growing up, if you will, the idea wasn't that you have to, we are not telling what to do. We just report what we found, right? And then that finding will then reverberate within the organization. At least that's how it all began. But as we heard earlier today, I think Christian from Brentford said, look at the data now. What we are doing, we are looking at the data, and we now also have to tell why this is happening. And therefore, our ability or maybe willingness to storytell, to pick and choose bits and pieces for a story, as opposed to report everything that we found, where we have such a built-in bias against bias, right? It doesn't come naturally to us. On the bright side, we have a natural experience or expertise rather, in content creation. Because we do for a living, that's what we do for a living. Every day we go out and find out what people do, why people do that. We are the original content creators. We, unlike many other industries that struggle for creating content, because there's nothing out there, we do this day in, day out. So and with that comes, and I think probably one of the most important, the innate understanding of what an insight is. Right? So that's, again, what we do for a living. And many other businesses, people use the term insight, but mean very different things by that. So in this context, the big question is, how do we apply all this to market research? So how can these guys sitting out here, how can they go back in the office and start doing something that will help them to deliver faster, quicker, better marketing campaigns? And the first step to that, sort of as a level setting, is that everyone here has a website, they use emails, many of them will have some content function, maybe a blog, maybe this, maybe there might be a Facebook page or a LinkedIn page. How does this combination of platforms and tool is different from Martech? What turns into Martech?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things with that. It's a good question. It's something that I used to struggle with at the early points of my career, which is what's different about this than the old days where we used to actually have a lot of this technology. And I think it's sort of the change in focus, right? So in the past, a lot of this stuff has been, there's a piece here, there's a piece there, IT runs it, IT budgets for it, and it's sort of completely something that the business never got involved with. I think the biggest change that's happened now is really this idea, it's probably about 5 years, even before the Gartner report came out, that businesses are actually starting to say, look, if we're going to be accountable for this stuff, we want to be able to control it. We want to be able to manage it. So it's this idea of sort of what's going on with the business side of the fence, what's going on with the digital side of the fence, the marketing side of the fence. How do they work with IT, and what is the sort of ecosystem that's been created now that's a lot more integrated, right? There's not a lot, well, there's a little bit of this, but in the bigger companies, you don't find a lot of sort of these random patches. They're trying to sort of create, that slide I showed you with these companies that have Martech organizations, they're trying to stitch those pieces together, right? The integration of the data, the understanding that customer journey from a digital perspective, from when they first come to your site to when they actually close as business, when we're serving them as an organization, to when they're renewing, that's actually something that Martech can do. More business organizations are taking that control and putting it on the business side of the fence.
So let me just throw a question out to the audience. Raise your hand if you or your department make technology decisions. All right, so about 1/3 of the room. Also raise your hand if you, with some frequency, utter the term Martech internally.
Not as much. Shocking.
Not as much. So there's a promise here that the technology that disrupts our business on one hand can also help us reach out to our customers and differentiate, help us tell stories and so on and so forth. What's a practical roadmap to start adopting that? I mean, everyone needs to start somewhere.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it varies. I think the practical map of what it is that you do to kick off varies for a lot of people. A lot of people actually start this with analytics. I think in your case, because you've got all of this content knowledge, there's one thing that Peter sort of told me 6 or 7 times, he was that you guys have a lot of the content. You've got the expertise on this stuff. I think it's clearly getting that stuff out, right? Not just in terms of official reports that you're doing for your clients, which is obviously important, but making sure that other people outside know that you have the information, you wish to disperse it, you may have to anonymize some of the stuff because you don't want all of the stuff to get out there. but it's getting them to actually know this. So I think it's content distribution, it's content marketing essentially. It's optimization of that content, getting out there on WordPress, getting out there on some blog technology, getting out there on your website. Maybe it's not you that's writing on the website. Someone mentioned they get, they take it's not just the PhDs on there, it's the interns. Getting some of these other folks who have grown up with this technology, with this idea that content is king, onto your website and publishing stuff. To me, that seems to be where the best starting place is for you. I think a lot of you are already doing this. However, starting it off is not the end of the journey by any stretch. Companies that do this really, really, really well continue to do this. So I think you just have to keep doing that. You've got to build your content, get it out there, optimize it, and see what's working and what isn't. Going back to that measurement thing, are people engaged with your content? If you've got 2 people reading this, maybe you need to write about new things, because that's not the stuff that your audience is interested in doing.
So before we're moving on, just wanted to throw out that anyone who has a question, there's a mic waiting for you right there. And while we're waiting, oh, there you are, right there. Right over there.
Just to sort of put a spanner in the works, a lot of the conversations we've had today have been about relationships, making sure that you meet people face to face. It's a very people business. It's also a very small industry in that everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Is this not a way of maybe kind of putting your marketing into an automated system so you feel like you're ticking boxes? But when you've got a really small number of people you want to be talking to, is it not actually better simply to be trying to go out and meet them rather than be constantly, integrating your Facebook, your social media, or your emails, your blog? It feels like it's a way of distancing yourself from the people rather than getting closer to them. That's just a question.
There's no question that has come up, right? Are we removing the human from sort of the equation? And this isn't just for market research. This is true for everything that we do in marketing in general. I think the point that I've made before is it isn't about stopping that and doing this. It's about adding this to that, right? So when you go out and talk to people, you can leverage technology to find more people to talk to, right? One isn't, to me, sort of sitting by itself than the other. I think it's a combination of both. Now, I've had other companies come to me and say, look, I can't do that. I've got to pick one or the other. Well, then that's true. It's the business goals and your business strategy that sort of decide what you do with Martech. If you are a really small shop and you don't have the ability to do both things, then don't. You should do with what works for you, what's proven to work for you. But I think the point that we've always made in the space is you can do small things in Martech that empower you for the other things that you do. And maybe in some cases, look, I heard this a lot in banking with the ATMs, that the tellers, the relationship with the tellers is what they wanted and stuff. Banking, that was 15 years ago. Banking has gone through this extraordinary change with branch banking, right? I'm not saying that that's equivalent to you, but my point is that you might in fact get to a point where the technology does replace some things, but doesn't others. I think that softer touch with the human connection is really, really important. And trust me, it's something we struggle with all the time.
I would also throw in another observation. When you look at our evolving competitive set, where do we compete? What business are we in? Where do we compete and who do we compete with? Some of the names that were thrown around today, in fact, some of the platforms that we are discussing, was as much friends as frenemies, right? And how they reach out and how they cover. I think we need to understand how we compete for the share of mind, right? And what exactly we're telling, what is the story that we are exactly telling, as opposed to just, let's say, the tools or methods that we are selling. So I think anyone who has ever seen Lenny Murphy present where we are headed and how we cast ourselves, I know that as the tectonic plates have shifted a great deal, and I think that's one of the reasons why we think of that. Let me pick up on another subject, and that's insights, right? So we should ace this. We should be better than everyone else. We know insights. That's what we do for a living. And I'm telling you and asking you as to, are we really leveraging this knowledge? Before getting into research, I had a 20-year detour in advertising, creating advertising campaigns. And the critical piece has always been the insight. Do we have a strong insight? Well, now in research we do have an insight. From your experience, what's the way to act upon that? I think that's a...
Yeah, so I mean, I think for some of this, I'd actually take off the Martech cap a little bit and go back to my old sort of leadership cap. I think I've sat in many, many conversations around internal, so not with vendors, but sort of internal research groups, internal insights groups that tell us things about what we're seeing, what our customers want, what products they want built, services, what they think about X, Y, or Z, what demographics work, what don't. But I think what would help in this space is, in addition to that, which is all very important, how do we then take actions to be able to solve for that, leveraging this MarTech space, right? So if we go through an exercise where we say, we're listening to a report and an insight that comes back and says, this age group to this age group, they convert better if the content is actually relevant to them. Maybe part of what it is that you're presenting to leadership is around saying, yes, that piece, which you clearly know, and then taking that a step further, which might be a stretch for some of you, but important, I think, that says, so why don't we go about finding out how we can bring personalization technology into the organization to solve for that particular piece, right? I think it's more than just, here's the data clearly. It's way more than, here's what the grid looks like. It can also be more than, here's what you can do. It can also be working with the business to say, here's the solution that you can come up with based off of what it is that we know. So that's complicated and that's complex, but that's a good place to start for me. When I think about insights, it's always about, yeah, that's good. Some of that stuff I thought through itself. How is it that I can actually solve for that? And if we can hear sort of, we being sort of the broader sort of business leadership side say, how can we use technology to solve for that? Is there technology out there? That's something that would be incredibly valuable, I think, to a lot of folks that sit on the other side of the table.
So on this note, unfortunately, we just ran out of time. Yep. So with that, thank you so much, and thank you very much again.
Sure.